Okay, I'm trying something new today. Bear with me. Hi everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be something a little bit different on my channel. I say a little bit different. I have mentioned many times now that I am trying to move over to doing more of a mixture of bookish and theatrical content. I've done theatre-based videos, I've done videos that were sort of like wrapping up my last year in theatre, sort of going through every show that I went to see in 2022. I did like a favourite shows of 2022 one. I've done, actually no, you won't have seen this yet, so I won't say that, but there is some more theatrical content to come that I've already filmed, but this is the start of a new thing that I'm hoping to do every month. So every month I do my reading wrap up where I go through all of the books that I read during that particular month, and I give you like little mini reviews, star ratings, talk through like stats and things like that. There's not going to be so many stats in this video, but generally just like wrap up that month in reading. Now my other main interest other than reading is theatre, and I go and see a fair amount of shows each month if possible. There will be some months where I only go and see like one or two, so I may like combine those wrap up videos, but in general, and I know this is true for at least like the first 3 months of the year, I will have enough to do an entire video to talk about what I've seen that month. And within those videos I'm going to do some more like deep dives into each show, what my feelings are, what my star rating is, what sort of like standout moments were, standout performances, just a little bit more information on what I particularly enjoyed about a show, sometimes what I didn't enjoy as much about a show. Just like I said, we're just gonna go more into it. So I think you all get the idea of what this video is going to be, so why don't we just start with one, shall we? During the month of January I was able to go and see 7 shows. They were all in London, because usually like my shows are going to be a mixture of London and then closer to home, usually in Sheffield. This time they were all in London. The Sheffield theatres for the majority of the month were tied up with the pantomime and also Standing on Sky's Edge, which is on at the Crucible at the minute, which I was contemplating going to see and then decided not to, and I may regret it, but it is transferring down to London, but that is a whole other story. So what I did go and see was things that I went to see in London. I had 2 weekends there. First weekend I went to see 4 shows, and then the last weekend I went to see 3. So I'm just going to talk you through in order of all the shows that I went to see this month. The first one was a little bit different than what I normally go to see because it was a play. Not just a play, it was a Shakespeare play. It was As You Like It. I'm going to put a picture of the poster here because this is one of the shows where I actually didn't get a programme because they didn't sell them. They had like a QR code and you could scan it to see what all the cast was, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, I like the whole like let's save on paper and all that, but I do like having a programme. I have a collection of them, so it felt weird not having one. That's my first thought of this show. My second thought was that this show was fantastic. I have seen a few Shakespeare plays before, so I have seen Romeo and Juliet. I saw the production that Kenneth Branagh directed at the Garrick that had Lily James and was supposed to be Richard Madden, but he wasn't in it when I went. It was Freddie Fox. I've also seen Hamlet because I saw that at the Barbican when Benedict Cumberbatch was in it. So obviously the Shakespeare plays that I've seen before were his tragedies. I've never actually watched a Shakespeare comedy. I've seen like recordings of like A Midsummer Night's Dream, but I've never like actually sat and properly watched a Shakespeare comedy. And I was very pleasantly surprised by this. I was a bit worried that I wouldn't be able to sort of follow along with the plot because I didn't know this one as well. Like, there are some Shakespeare plays where I've seen like other retellings of them, so like I know enough of them that I could easily pick it up. I wasn't completely aware of what this one was. I knew it involved one character like pretending to be a man because that is a general concept in Shakespeare comedies, is that there is like sort of mixing around with gender, which is actually something that I'm going to come on to in a minute when I talk about what I liked about this show. But I didn't really know the ins and outs of the story, and luckily I was able to follow along. One of the reasons why was that this was a very good production in terms of accessibility. So this entire production was captioned. The theatre that it was in the round, so there were seats on all sides of the stage. The stage was in the middle of the floor, and it's fairly intimate theatre as well. It's actually a new theatre. It's called At Soho Place, which is the first new theatre built on the West End in, I think it's 40 or 50 years. It's been a while anyway, and when you go in it doesn't feel like a typical theatre. It's a very different setup than the sort of more old-fashioned buildings that you go into. Like, it's very modern, and when you get into the auditorium it's completely different as well because like I said, it is in the round, and there weren't that many rows of seats in like sort of the main section, which is where we were, and then there were 2 balconies that only had a couple of rows of seats in each one. But around the first balcony there were screens all the way around that had captions throughout the performance, which were very helpful because obviously Shakespeare is a little bit harder to take in, so sometimes it was good to be able to read that and just help me to sort of absorb the material a little bit more. Also, we did have a character in here who was played by a deaf actress. Rose Ayling-Ellis was in the cast. You may know her from winning Strictly Come Dancing a couple of years ago. She was also in EastEnders. She was in this cast playing Celia, and her lines were portrayed using a mixture of mediums really. So some of it was like actual sign language, I assume it was BSL. Some of it was done through more like mime and was really like, played up for the comedic effect, and it was fantastic. There were a couple of lines that were spoken, but it was like a very particular moment in the show, and I really liked how they brought that into it as well. I felt like it was a very interesting character moment, but the majority of her lines were done through some sort of expression that wasn't vocal. So you had the actual lines on the caption, and then you would see her acting them out, and you could tell that it wasn't like word for word, but it was getting the point of the line across, and the way that she did that sort of conveyed the meaning of them more than the words were at times, because the words obviously was in this like old Shakespearean language. It was sort of figuring out what it meant, whereas if you watched her doing it, you could see what it meant because you could see what her intention was in that moment, and I just loved how that all came together. It did also mention some things to do with gender as well. So while you had a character that was purposely dressing as a different gender within the context of the story as part of sort of the setup, you did also have a couple of characters where the characters are typically male, but they were played by female performers in the part. The cast did also feature some trans and non-binary performers in there as well, and it just felt like a really sort of fresh, modern take on Shakespeare, but still being very sort of like classically Shakespeare, because Shakespeare's always messed around with gender. Like, it's just a thing obviously that's always been around, because back in those days the only people who could perform the plays were men. But it just felt like the sort of combination of all of the different things in this play really brought it together to be this like really unique version of it. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well at all, but basically what I'm saying is that I absolutely adored this show, and I'm going to give it 5 stars. Oh, also I need to point out Alfie Enoch singing in this. There was a lot of singing in it that I wasn't necessarily expecting, and I feel like I possibly should have done, because I know that some of the performers that were in this show I have seen in musicals before, so I knew that some of them could sing, but there were just points of singing that I wasn't necessarily expecting, and most of that was beautiful. And then there was a point of singing that was not supposed to be beautiful, it was supposed to be awful, and Alfie Enoch really went for it, and it was fantastic. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, 5-star production. I should also maybe point out that this weekend was a trip with Meg, so I went with Meg to go and see As You Like It. Then on the Saturday I went by myself to go and see a show, because Meg went to go and see a ballet that I wasn't that interested in seeing, and I went to go and see a show, and I did go to see a specific performer. I mean, I've seen the show before and I've seen this performer in this show before, but I just wanted to go and see it again, and sadly that performer was not on. But I do want to make a point of saying here, while I was momentarily disappointed that he wasn't on, I was still excited to see the show, and I was excited to see the cover and see what he could do. I went to go and see Moulin Rouge. The performer that I was going to go and see was Jamie Moscato as Christian. We all know my love for Jamie Moscato as Christian. Sadly he was not on that day. We had the first cover, who was called Robson Broad, and like I said, whilst I was momentarily disappointed that he wasn't on that day, I was very excited to see the cover. I do very much believe that you are paying to see a show, not a particular performer, and whilst sometimes yes you do really want to go and see a particular performer, sometimes it does happen that you end up booking a ticket for a day that is not their day, or maybe they're ill, like things happen. It is absolutely fine. And actually it was quite an interesting experience to see this show without somebody that I like was particularly interested in seeing before I went to see it, if that makes sense. Because the first 2 times that I saw this show, I saw the original actor playing Christian on the West End, and I was not a huge fan of his performance. And when I went to see it, I was kind of like, okay, so I think the show could be really good, but I don't love this cast. And then I went back, I'm sorry, with Jamie Moscato, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what I wanted it to be. Like, the show is really good, and I really like Jamie Moscato as Christian. But seeing it this time kind of cemented the fact that I do actually just really enjoy the show as well, because now I didn't have sort of the preconception of how much I was going to love Jamie Moscato as Christian, because when I went to see him back in November, I was going to see him as well, because I'd really liked him in Heathers before, so I already had sort of like a predisposition towards liking his portrayal of the character. Whereas this time, like, I had no expectations whatsoever, and I still really enjoyed the show. Like, I just had a great time. I think it's a very fun show to watch. It's definitely got its faults. I mean, there are parts from the film that I wish that I'd kept, like the ending in particular. I just feel like I missed some of the drama from the way that it's done in the film. I know it would be harder to stage with like exactly how it goes down in the film, but I just wish that there was a little bit more to sort of Christian's confrontation of Satine. But as a whole, I really love this show, and I do like some of the other changes that they made. I like some of the newer songs that they brought in. I think it works really well. I know that people still debate which one is a better version of All Time Go to Roxanne, whether it's the film version or the stage version. I happen to love them both. I think they both work for the different mediums that they are in. I don't think the stage version, I don't think the film version would have worked quite as well on the stage. I think there's something about the stage version that just works really, really well within that moment. The set in this is fantastic. Like, it's just the second you walk in to like the actual auditorium bit of the theatre, you are transported to the Moulin Rouge, and it is like second to none. I can't think of another theatre that is quite so transformed on the West End at the minute. The ensemble cast are all fantastic, the dancing is amazing, the opening numbers on both acts just really set up what you're going to see for the rest of the show. It's just got that spectacle to it, and can you tell I really, really like this show. In terms of the other cast, this is the second time I've seen quite a lot of them, but Melissa James as Satine I do really like as well. I feel like she's settling into the role more than the first time I saw it, because the first time I saw it she'd not been in it for very long, and it feels like she's settling into it more. I do feel like in general she settles into the role more as the show goes on anyway. There's certain songs of hers I feel like stronger than others, but in general I do prefer her to the first Satine that I saw. I feel like I'm just like slating the original cast here. I loved parts of the original cast, it was just like parts of it that didn't work, and sadly it was the two leads for me. The Harold Zidler that we have now, I believe his name is Matt Rickson. I enjoyed him. I did really like Clive Carter though before, but I think again that's partly just because I really like Clive Carter. So actually with that I think I enjoyed both portrayals, and yeah, I feel like I'm just rambling about this one now. It's one of those where, because I've seen it quite a few times now, I'm sort of picking apart individual things, which although I'm saying that, you're going to see this show in my wrap up for next month as well, and I feel like when I talk about it that time I will not be picking apart the show as a whole. I will be talking about one particular performance, and we will get to that next month. So then on the Saturday night I met back up with Meg and also with Maddie, and we went to go and see The Phantom of the Opera. Oh, this is a shiny programme and the ring light is not having it. There we go, let's try and hold it like that. The Phantom of the Opera is a very long running musical. I'm sure you all know enough about it that I don't need to give you a synopsis or anything. But this is a show I've seen quite a few times. I want to say it's 6 times now, but it has changed a little bit in more recent years. They've changed some of the set pieces, they've just made things kind of a little bit less in a way. So it was partly because the sets were old, and it was partly as a money saving technique during COVID lockdowns. And when it came back after lockdowns, it had these changes to it, and I do think the show suffers for it a little bit. Like, there are just certain moments that don't work quite as well, like the spectacle isn't there as much. In particular for me, it's a reprise of All I Ask of You right before the end of Act 1, when previously the Phantom would sort of be suspended from a sort of golden angel thing in the top of the theatre and would sort of like hang over the audience a little bit, whereas now that doesn't happen, so it's done with a piece on the stage instead, and it's just not quite as effective. There are also other changes. I am not the best at like remembering what they all are, because it was a while ago since I saw like the original production. Meg was telling me a little bit about some of the changes in like actual Phantom of the Opera though, like the song Phantom of the Opera, and the only one that really stuck out to me was the angel bit. So I'm like, okay, so it wasn't too bad for me, because like I clearly wasn't affected by it as I was watching it, but I do think that there's just something about it that's not quite as grand a spectacle as before. That being said, I would much rather have this reduced staging and have it still be on the West End than have them keep the staging and then end up closing it like they are doing on Broadway, because I really, really enjoy this show, and I do like having the option to go and see it. I do plan on seeing it again in the near future, because there is going to be a cast change soon, and actually that is part of the reason why we went to see it this time. So Lucy St. Louis, who's playing Christine, has actually just left as Christine a couple of days before I filmed this video, and I saw her as Christine last year and I really, really liked her performance, and it was nice to see her one last time for she has a beautiful voice, and there was something about her performance as Christine that I just really, really loved as well, like something that really made me sort of connect to her as a character, which doesn't always happen. Like, I feel like Phantom is one of these shows where if it's not in the right hands, it can be a little bit easier to like not love the characters as much. I personally just find it harder to connect to some of them sometimes, but if it's in the right hands, I'm like, oh no, I am here for this story and I'm loving it, and that's what it felt like this time. I did also really love the rest of the cast. We have Killian Donnelly as Phantom, who is going to be leaving at the end of the month, and it's part of the reason why I'm going to go and see it again, because I am excited to see who is taking over from him, but again we'll get to that in later months. But Killian Donnelly is a West End actor I've seen in quite a few things now. I really, really enjoy his performances. He's one of my favourite Valjeans that I've seen in Les Mis, and he is one of my favourite Phantoms that I've seen. I just think that he has this nice sort of balance between that like sort of intimidating, scary side of Phantom, but also that sort of broken person who has had a bit of a rubbish life, and no, that does not excuse anything that he does, but also like helps you to understand how he got there a little bit, even if you don't agree with it. And yeah, I just felt like he did a really nice balance of that. I also really liked the Raoul, and I'm gonna forget his name, and this is not actually the programme from this time I went to see it because I can't find that programme. So and there's been a cast change since this one, so I can't tell you what he's called, but I will put it down here. Meg knows his name, but I do not know it off the top of my head. But I feel like it was very good. Raoul in particular, again, is another character that I only like certain times I see it. I'm not like a Raoul girl. I'm not necessarily wanting Christine to end up either of the men in the show, and I just find Raoul can be a bit bland sometimes if in the wrong hands. I have seen some very, very good Raouls before. Seen Killian Donnelly as Raoul before, and he was very good. I saw Hadley Fraser as well, and I loved his version, and I do really like the name of the actor that I will insert here in this role as well. And yeah, this was also a 5-star show. I don't think I actually said that Moulin Rouge was a 5-star show. I mean, I'm saying they're all 5 stars. Objectively, probably like this time of seeing Moulin Rouge, it was like a 4.5, but I love it so much that I'm always going to round it up to a 5. And probably objectively of seeing Phantom, this was maybe a 4.5 just because I prefer the original staging. But again, if we're going to give it a 5, we're going to go with our feels. Spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot of 5 stars in this video. Speaking of, the next show that I went to go and see was Newsies. This is the first time that I saw this month. So I actually saw this twice, and you know what, actually, I'm going to kind of just talk about them both in one go and talk about the differences. Because I saw this show here, and then I also saw it the second weekend. There is one show that was sort of like in between those two performances, but we're just going to talk about this twice because it makes it a lot easier than me sort of repeating myself, because a lot of it is just going to be, oh my god, that ensemble, how do they do that? So I wasn't originally supposed to go and see this twice this month. I booked an extra ticket because they had an offer on tickets, and me and Meg both wanted to see it again. I really, really love this show. I have loved this show for a while. I have watched the pro shot more times than I care to even think about. I was very worried when it first came over to the UK that they may like change things too much and just not do it justice to how much I love the pro shot. Luckily, it is fantastic. There are changes to it, but a lot of them I really, really enjoy. I'm not necessarily saying they're better. I think it's just works really well for the space that it is in, particularly a lot of the choreography stuff. There is changes particularly to King of New York at the beginning of Act 2 that I really, really adore. Seize the Day is fantastic. There's a lot of ways that they use the space in the theatre, because they call it an immersive experience. They call it an immersive production. I wouldn't necessarily say it's immersive in the way that like some productions are, because some immersive productions you are literally like walking around the building and just seeing like little vignettes of scenes playing out around you. It's not like that. Like, you are watching just a regular stage show, but they really use the entirety of the theatre so that you feel like you are very much in the action. That's what it means by immersive. Immersive is a buzzword at the minute, and there are different ways of using it, and for this one it's more just about how they use the space within the theatre, if that makes sense. It will make sense if you go and see it, and if you do have a chance before April, I do recommend you do, because it is so good. The music in this is endlessly catchy because it's written by Alan Menken. Like, that's all you need to know, really. Like he who's written lots of Disney songs, like it's always going to be good music. And the performances were really good as well. So actually, speaking of performances, because I've seen this a few times now, I have had a chance to kind of compare and contrast a couple of things. I haven't actually seen any of the covers on for any of the main roles. I've seen some like swings on for ensemble parts, but not enough that I can sort of pick them out, because the most sort of featured parts of the ensemble have been the same people when I've gone. But for the main actors, I have noticed slight like differences just sort of between shows, which has sort of cemented my thoughts on the performances as well. So the first time that we saw it was in previews back in December, and it was literally like less than a week into their performances. So there were moments where it just felt like maybe people needed to grow into their parts a little bit more, just like settling in. Like, I'm never going to judge a show fully when it's in previews, because like the point of previews is that there's still time to change things, there's still time to work things, and it's not there for review yet. Like, the press doesn't review it until after opening night. I'm not going to start doing that on here as well. So from previews, I was very intrigued by parts of it. The second time that we went to see it, I felt like the two sort of lead actors, so you've got Michael Ohunka-Lindsay, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, and I meant to look it up, I'm very sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Jack Kelly is a character in this. His performance, I felt like, was not quite as good the second time I saw it. It felt like he's not in his acting abilities, more in the vocal part of it. It just felt like he was maybe a little bit tired at the time, which understandably he may be. The third time I went to see it, I felt like he was on top form again. He was fantastic. I may still prefer Jeremy Jordan in the Pro Shot, but that's possibly just because that's what I'm used to. I do really like his interpretation of the character. I actually really like him as an actor. I saw him in Legally Blonde last year and his version of Emmett was fantastic. But yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, there's something about Jeremy Jordan's version that's just always going to stick with me a little bit more. But I do really, really love his like characterization in particular. I feel like some of the acting choices in this are fantastic. Speaking of acting choices, Bronte Barbie, who plays Catherine Plummer, I love her in this role, particularly her version of Watch What Happens. I just think it's so fun. It's so fun. And I just love it so much. It's one of my favourite songs in the show anyway. And it was like one of the moments I was waiting for. And then when I first saw her do it, I'm just like, oh yes, this is very, very good. I feel like she's just got the right sort of attitude for this role. I will say that the third time I went to see it, so the second time this month, she had been off earlier on in the week with an illness, and I believe she was actually off the day after I went to see it as well. And you could tell that maybe she wasn't feeling her best with like sort of reaching some of the notes, but that's not going to affect like how I would rate it at all, because everyone has days where they're just not feeling that great. She was still fantastic. She still like hit those notes a lot better than I would be able to. So yeah, this is still a 5-star production. Also, I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but if I haven't, the choreography in this, like I don't understand how the ensemble does it. Like there is just so many big dance numbers and they're doing like 2 shows each day at the weekend. So the first time I went to see it was on a Sunday matinee. So they'd done 2 shows on the Saturday and they still had one left on the Sunday and it was still perfect. And then on the second time I went to see it, I saw the second performance on the Saturday. I saw the Saturday evening. I was like, you have already done this today and you are still able to do these dance routines. I just don't understand. Like, I'm in awe of everybody on that stage. It was so good. It's 5 stars. We've already said it's 5 stars. So then we're on to the second weekend that I went down to London. I went down by myself. I did meet up with Becca to go and see Newsies, but for the Saturday afternoon I was by myself and I went to go and see a show that I had not seen before. It has transferred over from Broadway. It was on Broadway quite a while ago now, though it was like pre-pandemic, but it has come over with the original, with some of the original cast from Broadway as well, and it is George Takei's Allegiance. So this is loosely based on George Takei's own life. It's about the internment camps that Japanese people were put into during World War II after Pearl Harbor, and it's a piece of history that's not really spoke about that much. Like it's not part of what you learn in sort of school about World War II, or at least not from my experience, and from hearing other people talk about this show. I think that's sort of a general thing as well, is that we hear about sort of like concentration camps that the Nazis put Jewish people into, but we don't tend to hear about the response from the other side of them being afraid of other people. So in America they decided to put Japanese people into these internment camps in order because they were sort of scared of the risk of another attack after something like Pearl Harbor had happened. And like I said, it's a very important thing to learn about, because like what they did to these people was horrible. Like maybe not quite to the extremes that happened in the concentration camps, which is possibly why you don't hear about it as much, but just sort of the idea of separating them from society, and some of the treatment that they got in these places was awful. Like, it's plain and simple, it really was. It was a really interesting musical in the way that it's told this story. So it's, like I said, loosely based on George Takei's life, because his family was actually in one of these camps. He was obviously fairly young at this time, so like the main character isn't him, but it's based on sort of like the general experiences that him and other people like him had. And it starts off with George Takei playing the older version of the main character in this show, Sam, whose younger self is played by this guy here, which is Telly Leung. He is a Broadway actor. He's also done TV stuff. He's also done TV stuff. I was very excited to see him in this, actually, and he did not disappoint. I will get on to him in a minute. But yeah, George Takei plays the older version, and then it sort of flashes back to the rest of his life. And during the rest of the time, George Takei plays the grandfather in the show. Now, George Takei is very much the star of this show. Like, he's not the main character at all, but like, it's advertised as George Takei's Allegiance. It's very much, people are going to see him a lot of the time. He has one of the standout roles in the show, even though he's not like sort of the main part. He's just a very sort of lovable character that provides like a lot of nice moments in the show, a lot of sort of lightheartedness around some of the awful stuff that's happening. And I won't lie, that is a big part of the reason that I went to see it. I am a Star Trek fan, so I wanted to go and see him in it, and I did really enjoy his performance. And like I said, in general, I enjoyed the show. I do think I had some issues with the pacing and just kind of how the story was put together. Whilst I think it was a very important story, and I think that a lot of the notes that were in there needed to be hit, I think it did a good job of showing like the different things that happened within these camps, so and the different attitudes of people within these camps, because a lot of the sort of central conflict of this, the reason it's called Allegiance, is that you have these people that are put in these camps, and some of them are sort of immigrants who have come over from Japan. They are first generation, and they still very much sort of hold an allegiance to Japan. So when they are at one point asked to kind of renounce any link to that country and say that they fully support America instead, it is a very difficult thing for them to do. We've got sort of like the main character Sam, who is born and raised in America, is of Japanese descent, and he is sort of the opposite way around, where he very much wants to fight for his country, which is America, and is willing to kind of do that and separate himself from that background, but isn't necessarily allowed to do that at first. And then when he is, he's not treated in the same way that other soldiers who are fighting are. They were kind of used in the more dangerous situations to go and sort of risking their lives rather than the other soldiers, is what it came across as. Again, I don't know as much about this part of history because it's not something I've been taught. I am interested in reading more about it after seeing this, and I think that's one of the things that it does really well, is like I said, it brings up the importance of this story. It just felt like some of the stuff in there, like I said, that sort of conflict between the two sides is not necessarily built up in opposition of each other enough, if that makes any sense. The best way to describe it is that you've got Sam, the main character, and then you have another character called Frankie, who has a very opposite view. They're a similar age, so they could very much like be in a similar position, but Frankie's family has been affected more by what has happened in the reaction to Pearl Harbor, and he is very much against America because of what they've done to his family. So there is one song that I particularly remember where you do kind of see them in opposition, and you can see why their stances are very much in opposition of each other, but there's not enough of showing you them actually growing to kind of dislike each other, so that when the ending happens and there is sort of like this event that leads to kind of where you're at when you had the flashback right at the beginning. This is hard to explain without going in spoilers, but essentially when you get to the end of the flashback part, and that's kind of like, oh, okay, so this is how we got here, it felt like it wasn't necessarily built up to enough, because while I couldn't understand the stances, I didn't necessarily see it from the character point of view enough. I don't know if that's really making sense. There were also just like a few other moments that were a bit too rushed. There was a romance in there that, like, whilst I liked the chemistry between the actors, I just felt like we didn't see enough of leading up to that. It happened very quickly, and then there is sort of a event that happens with one of those characters after, and I think because I'd not had enough time to kind of build up that, I didn't necessarily feel as affected by it as I should have done. There were also a lot of times where it felt like the songs just started with no real build up to them. I feel like a lot of the issues I had with this was with the book, like the script of the musical. I feel like the songs were actually really good, although some of the lyrics were a little bit too, like, it felt like conversations rather than like an actual song, again, if that makes sense. Like, I know that obviously women musicals, you will have conversations as songs, but a lot of the times, but this isn't like a sung through musical. It's not like something where every single word is done in song. It has moments of dialogue, and then a song starts, and when the song started, it didn't feel like they were too different from the dialogue. Like it didn't feel like they had like a melody or a rhythm to them in the way that I felt like they should have done at times. Some of the songs were amazing, and the standout moments for it are, I'm gonna look at the song names. One of them was called Higher, something What Makes a Man. Yeah, What Makes a Man. Those songs were sung by Sam or Sammy. His name's both in there, and then Higher was sung by Kay, and I loved both of those songs, and I love both of those performances actually. So yeah, actually I've already mentioned Telly Leung, but I should also mention Ayn Rand Ferrer, because she was fantastic as Sammy's sister. And in general, like, the performances in this were fantastic, and like I said, the songs in general were really good. I just feel like there's certain things that need working on, but I'm still going to give it a 4-star. It was still like a good show, but just like one that I did have a few issues with. I think that makes sense. I hope it made sense. And then we'll get to my last show of the month. So I may be able to talk about this one quite well because I've seen this one just a few times, I mean 25 times to be exact. Although I do need to argue that I've not seen this particular production 25 times. So the show that I went to see is Les Miserables at the Sondheim Theatre in London. So when I say I've seen it 25 times, I was working this out the other day. I believe have seen the original production 14 times, I think it was. Maybe it's more. Let me work this out 1 second. So I've seen the original production 14 times, and then I have seen the touring production twice. I have seen a school production, so an amateur production. It was put on by a university group. I've seen 3 different concert versions, and then I've seen the new production 5 times. So various different versions of this, but this particular production I've seen it 5 times. When I say this particular production, it is because like Phantom, this had some changes. These changes were done a while ago, though. They were actually done the very end of 2019. The main change, very, very sadly, is that it used to have a revolve on the stage, so a bit that turned round. That revolve is sadly no longer there, and every single time I go to see it without the revolve, I'm like, I love this show, I still love this show, it's still a 5-star show. Spoiler alert, 5 stars. But it's not as good without the revolve. There is like one particular moment, so if you want to know absolutely nothing about Les Mis, maybe turn off now, but like I'm gonna say some things that I feel like most people already know. Like, it is not a happy musical. I'm gonna say that. And if you want to not know anything else, turn it off. If you're okay with telling me something, you should still be here. Basically, a lot of people die in this show, and there are not many characters that are actually surviving at the end of it for various different reasons. They die at different points throughout the show. There was one particular scene that features sort of a mass death of a lot of characters, and one particular moment where a character is revealed sort of hanging from the barricade, and it's just like an iconic image. And it's that part where it turns around and he's just there, sort of suspended with the flag behind him, and it's like beautiful imagery, and it's so iconic. And it's not there anymore. Like, it is, they've still got it in a way, but it used to be that the barricade revolved and you would see him hanging at the back, and now the barricade sort of opens up and then he's just on a cart in the middle. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like showing you that like these students thought that they were going to be these like revolutionary heroes, and at the end of the I was about to say at the end of the day, and that's literally a song from Les Mis, but at the end of the day they're kind of just there as like what really happened to them, like everyone's just going to forget them, they just got carted away. I think it's possibly supposed to be that, but I preferred the spectacle of it. I preferred it to be this like hero's death sort of moment rather than a, oh look how futile it is. And yeah, I get it for characterization, but I just, from an imagery point of view, I just much prefer the more spectacle. There are parts of this that I really, really like. I do like a lot of the set pieces that are in it now, there's more set pieces to it kind of from the side. So when you get to Paris, like there's more buildings and things. On my own, I really like the end of that where she sort of stands there and then the doors open and the barricade's there. It's not quite as good as the barricade sort of clicking into place like it used to with the revolve, but I do think it's a nice moment when Eponine sort of just stands there and then sees it, and it's like you getting to see it for the first time as well. There are, like I said, just tiny little bits that I really, really like. I feel like some of the like choices that have been made for acting, I don't think it's necessarily choices. I think it's choices in the direct. I don't think it's necessarily acting choices. It's more directing choices because I've seen it with different casts now. But some of the stuff just feels like they've just sort of fleshed out the characters a little bit more, it feels like in the factory scenes and in the Master of the House scenes. It just feels like all of the ensemble almost gets to do more, and like they feel like more fully fledged people rather than just there to support the principal cast. And yeah, there are bits of it that I absolutely adore, but there are bits of it that I don't love either. But we're not going to go too much into that, because what we're going to talk about today for this particular performance is the performances. So the lead actor in this, guy playing Jean Valjean, is a guy called John Robbins. I've seen him in it a few times now. I was actually trying to figure out how many times. I think it may be 5 times with him in it, to be honest. And I really, really love him as a performer. Every time I go and see Les Mis, I'm sort of like picturing my dream cast in my head, because I've seen it that many times now. I've seen that many different performers in all the different roles that it's hard not to have like a favourite for each role. And there are some roles where I'm like very much like okay, this is my favourite one that I've seen. Like I can tell you who my favourite Marius is without even asking. It's Rob Houchen. I can tell you that my favourite Javert is Bradley Jaden. Like there are plenty of people where I'm like, yes, this is my favourite straight up. But there are some where I'm like, okay, actually I've seen some really, really good ones of this. And Valjean is one of those, which is a good thing because he is like the lead character in the show. So you would hope that I've seen a fair amount of good ones, the amount of time I've seen it. But previously, I've always said that my favourites were either Ramin Karimloo or Killian Donnelly. I've loved both of their performances in it. John Robbins, the more I see him, the more I absolutely adore his performance. And he could potentially be my favourite Valjean. And I'm very sad that I won't get to see him as Valjean again. This is the reason why I went to see it again this weekend, was because I was like, I need to see him one last time before he leaves. He's going to go and play Phantom. I'm so excited to see him play Phantom. I'm going to book tickets for his opening night. Very, very happy about it. But I will miss his Valjean. And he also felt like, I don't know if I'm just imagining this, I don't know if it was just like a really good day for his performance, but it felt like possibly because he knows he's leaving soon, he was really like going for it. The thing that I really love about his performance is the acting part of it. Like he's an amazing singer. Singing, it just feels effortless throughout the entire thing. But some of the acting choices and just kind of like the way that he really went for it is the best way to describe it. Like the kind of like the anger in the beginning scenes when he's ripping up his yellow ticket of leave, and like the build in Bring Him Home when he sort of starts off as this soft prayer and then it just really builds up to like a, no, I need to protect Marius because I need to get him back to Cosette. And the way that sort of anger and desperation came through was just fantastic. I love John Robbins so much. I don't actually know when he's leaving yet. We know when he's going into Phantom, but we don't know when he's leaving Les Mis. But if I could go and see him in Les Mis again, I definitely would, because I just really, really love his performance. Right, I'm going to move on to other performers now. I actually saw the cover for Javert this time. So the Javert at the minute is usually David Faxton. He was not on that day, so I'm just having a look who it was. It was Adam Robert Lewis. I've not seen this person as Javert before. I did actually really enjoy his performance. I saw David Faxton the last time I saw it, and it didn't like dislike him, but he just wasn't my favourite. I feel like certain parts of this Javert I preferred. I did really, really love Confrontation in particular. I feel like him and John Robbins really bounced well off of each other. It was a solid performance for Javert, nothing sort of to complain about. I really, really like the Eponine at the minute. Eponine is actually my favourite character in the show, so let me remember what her name is. I'm doing so well at remembering names at the minute. Eponine is played by Nathania Ong, and I have seen her before and I really, really love her. I love her version of On My Own. Again, I think it sort of builds in the right way. I think a lot of the sort of solo songs in Les Mis start off very quiet and then just build up to this moment of, like I said, either anger or desperation or sadness, and it's just this like really like big moment that they get to. And some people are able to sort of do that build better than others. I've seen some people go in to On My Own very, very angry from the start, and I don't like that version of a performance because I feel like Eponine's it's sort of, because I feel like Eponine to me is more of a sad character than an angry character, and I always feel like the ones who play sort of the sadness and the desperation of it more are the ones I connect with more. I just feel like it works better in that moment, and I feel like this was particularly good On My Own that I saw. A Little Fall of Rain is always going to get to me as well. I did really like that performance. Basically, I really, really love Les Mis. I'm going to stop talking about it now, but it's a 5-star show, and I am sure I will be seeing it again this year because now there's going to be a new Jean Valjean, so I need to go and see them whenever they announce who it's going to be. I am intrigued actually as to who they're going to cast for this one, so we will see. Right, so that is everything. I feel like I got more coherent as it went along, luckily. Sorry if I have rambled a little bit. I will get better at doing these sort of wrap-ups and reviews. I'm gonna try and start like making more notes. The reason why I got better at doing these towards the end is that I'm filming this like 2 days after I got back from the second London trip, so I have like fresh thoughts on all those shows, but the ones from earlier on in the month I may not remember as much. So I'm gonna try and either do notes or like film a clip for myself just to like say my instant thoughts as soon as I come out, and then I can come and do this and put it more into like a actual sit down video. But I will try and get better at reviews. They're just a new thing for me, but I am very excited to be doing them. The next wrap up for theatre stuff will be my New York wrap up, which I'm sure I'm going to have lots of opinions on, so look forward to that one coming at the end of February. But yeah, that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know if you've seen any theatre shows this month. If you've seen any of the ones that I've seen, let me know what your favourite's been, and I will see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.